assigned to an analyst from the highest to the lowest score until such allocation runs out from the round. So we will be rank ordering. We will be posting per our regulations. Our preliminary posting will be in rank order. People will know their score and where they are in the round as we publish. In terms of DDAs, so both expiring and current DDAs will also be subject to competitive rules if you are applying for one of the rounds in 2020. Please note, if you wish to preserve the DDA status that would expire in 2020, you will need your application submitted by December 11th this year, specifying which 2020 round you'll be applying for. And we are limiting this to 2020 rounds. So there are some changes to our scorecard, or some additions, I should say, in the competitive environment. One way you could earn more points for the competitive side is when you forego, you'll get 1 point for every 1% of foregone eligible developer fee. And the eligibility is the definition as determined by the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, TCAC. So there are three things that we look at, which is the total eligible developer fee, the amount of the fee that is foregone, and what that translates to in a percentage. So the percentage of total foregone. The maximum you could earn in this category is 10 points. I have an example here. So if you have a project with a total developer fee of $3,500,000 and your eligible developer fee as determined by TCAC is $2 million, and let's say you're going to forego $200,000 of that developer fee. That means you're foregoing 10% of the eligible developer fee, which would give you that 10 points. So this can be found in our regulation section 5230N. The next slide is regarding, again, another competitive application characteristic. You could earn points for every 5 years you add to your term beyond the 30 years. So if you were to stay with a 55-year total term, in the competitive environment, that's giving you 10 points. The maximum you can receive is 10 points for this category. If you have shorter terms, it's 5 points additional for every, for every 5 years, in addition to the minimum term, you will get 2 points. So if you go to 40 years, that ends up being 4 points, 45 years, 6 points, etc. Again, the maximum is 10, and this can be found in section 5230 of Cdlac regulations, part F.
Good afternoon, I'm Richard, and we're going to refer to Cdlac regulations section 5230B 1 through 3, evaluation criteria, preservation projects. This is pretty basic information. We just want to emphasize what is available for you out there. Any project that is subject to a local, state, or federal rental or operating assistance contract is eligible for 10 points. If the project continues the rental structure prescribed by an expired residential rental agreement, it is also eligible for those same 10 points. Rents for each restricted rental unit type of 20% below average of the market comparable rents, or rents are limited to at least 50% of the tenant, and so on. That will also bring you an additional 10 points. There's total 20 points available to you. I highly recommend, if you do have a current agreement, and you most probably are charging 20% or more below the average market rate. So you're pretty much in there for 20 points. So we recommend that you look into that for your projects that are coming in that already have state and local or federal agreements attached to them. It's really important that you provide evidence. The evidence being that contract, that rental agreement, the bond regulatory agreement. That kind of information will garner those points for you. So please pay attention to that, and please provide the evidence. Very important. And I move on. To Sarah.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Lester. This point category that I'd like to talk to you about today is called exceeding the minimum income restrictions. There's two types of projects that we score. We score mixed income and we score non-mixed income projects. So in order to garner points for this category, 3 points for the mixed income project, 3 points for each 10% increment of restriction at 50% AMI. And then for units that are at 60% AMI, you get a half a point. So for non-mixed income projects, the maximum points is 35. 7 points for each 10% increment of restriction at 50% AMI, and 2 points for each 10% increment of restriction at 60% AMI. You can refer to Cdlac Regulations 5230C 1 through 2. The next slide is going to be an example of how to garner these points, how we calculate it. So example 1 is for a mixed income project. So for example, a project has 100 total units and is 20% affordable. So 10 of the affordable units are at 50% AMI and 10 are at 60% AMI. So how it's calculated is the number of units at 50% in this example is 10, which equals 10% of the total units. The number of units at 60% AMI also is 10, and it is 10% of the total units as well. So the total units at 50 and 60% equals 20, which is 20% of the total units. So for this example, the points are calculated as 3 points times 1%, 3 times 1, which is the 10% increment. So for the units at 50, the project will garner 3 points. And for the units at 60, it will garner a half a point. So it's the same calculation based on example 2 as well, only that the points change. So for the non-mixed income for projects with units at 60% AMI in this example, 60 of the units are at 50% and 40 are at 60. So 7% times 6, which is the 10% increment, is at 50% AMI. So for those units, the project will garner 42 points, I'm sorry. So 2 points at 4 each 10% increment at 60% AMI, that would garner 8 points. And so as you can see, the total points that the project will garner is actually 50 points. However, the maximum points allowable for this category for non-mixed income is 35. The next slide I would like to discuss with you guys is the gross rents. So 5 points will be awarded to projects that are not subject to the use of gross rents, but voluntarily do so to define restricted rental units as evidenced by one of the following. So in order to garner these points, you must provide a letter from the local jurisdiction that includes a current utility allowance schedule. The letter must certify that the proposed project is located within its jurisdiction, and the schedule must itemize and clearly identify which components of the utility allowance schedule applies to the project, and provide the total allowance for each unit type. If a project is to be substantially retrofitted for energy conservation or will be newly constructed with substantial energy conservation, the applicant may submit revised utility allowances based on the projected reduction in utility costs. So the next slide is an example of how we would like to see the utility allowance. So as you can see on this schedule, they clearly identify which components are applicable to the project. So this is what we would like to see. The next slide is exceeding the minimum rent restriction. 1 point will be awarded for each percentage point the highest rental rate of each restricted rental unit type is more than 20% below the average adjusted rental rates of comparable units as demonstrated by each applicable rent comparability matrices. Applications receiving preservation points under subdivision B of the Cdlac regulations 5230, of this section, shall be ineligible to receive points under this subdivision. So, yes. So example of that is the next slide. So this is how we kind of calculate the number of points. So as I previously said, we usually look at the rent comparability matrix for each unit type, and we compare the subject property's rent for each unit type with the weighted average market rate rent. And so in order to garner the points, each unit type must be more than 20%. So in this example, we'll see here that there are 1, 2, and 3 bedroom unit types. So the subject property, the rent for the 1 bedroom is $500, and the rent for the market rate is $1,575, which equates to 31.75% below the market. 2 bedrooms, $675, and for the market, $1,750. The percent below market is 38.75%. 3 bedroom, $800, market rate $1,925, which equates to 14.56% below market. So what we do is we take those percentages and we average them out. So the average is 37.35%. And in order to garner the points, like I said, that each unit type has to be at least 20% below the average. So what we do is we take the 20 from the 37.35, which leaves us 17.35. So those are the points that the project, those are the points that the project would have been, would garner if there was not a max. So the total points that the project can garner points in this category is 10, and not the 17.35.
Moving on to large family units. Basically what we're discussing here is any project that has 3 bedroom or higher, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms. Over 25% of their restricted rental units are above that 25% mark. You're going to earn 5 points for your project. Now to garner that is pretty important to understand. It's the restricted rental units, and it's covered in Cdlac Regulations 5230G. Quick example is you have 100 units, you got 75 2 bedrooms and 25 3 bedroom. They're all restricted, and that would earn the 5 points because you're 25 out of 100 is 25%. A project that has 100 units that are restricted rental units, 92 bedroom and 10 3 bedroom would not garner the points. Moving on to leveraging. Real quick point here. Leveraging is referring to your public funds that you have contributing to your project total development cost. Your public funds as a permanent funding source will earn 1 point for every dollar of public funds committed as a percentage of the total development cost, of course minus development fees. Again, on the leveraging side, we have made available to include taxable debt as a permanent funding source. It works in a similar fashion, only that it's a half a point will be awarded for every dollar of taxable debt commuted as a percentage of the total development cost minus your developer fees. You can earn 10 points maximum on this, and is covered in the Cdlac regulations 5230 H1 and 2.
This next slide we're going to talk about is the community revitalization area criteria. Before we move on, I'd just like to define what a community revitalization area is. It means a distressed community for which a comprehensive community revitalization plan has been adopted and efforts specific to the plan have occurred. Now, to define what a community revitalization plan is, it means a comprehensive plan that details specific efforts being undertaken in a neighborhood or a community that will result in the improvement of the economic conditions and the quality of life in the area. If you are seeking points for in your project for this criteria, the project must be in at least one of the following areas to receive 5 points. One of the areas is any qualified census tract or equivalent geographic area defined by the Census Bureau in which at least 50% of the households have an income of at least 60% AMI. Or the project can be located in a federal promise zone. Federal promise zone means any area with a continuous boundary and a population of not more than 200,000 that is nominated by a local government or Indian tribe and designated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to receive priority for federal funding on the basis of its unemployment, poverty, vacancy, and crime rates. So the evidence that we look for is a letter from a local government official. The letter must delineate the community revitalization efforts, including but not limited to community enhancement services like job training, after-school programs, and also funds expended and committed to improve community infrastructure, i.e. parks, storm water, sewer systems, street improvements, things like that. And projects completed within the past 3 years and are underway or are committed to be completed that contribute to community revitalization. So your letter from the local jurisdiction must include all 3 components in order to garner these points. And so we're looking for the letter to be very specific. We want to know what the dollar amounts are, what the improvements are. We want it all spelled out inside of the letter. And it has to be within the last 3 years, so that's a very important component as well. And the maximum points that can be warranted for this is 5 points.
Moving on to site amenities, would like to quickly point out that this is covered in Cdlac regulations 5230 J1-B. We have several subjects to cover here. I will go over them quickly as I can for you. Transit amenities and recreational amenities. The transit proximity is a bus stop within a third of a mile of a public transit corridor or a project, or if the project is in a rural area, using the van or dial-up service. Also, or within a half mile of a high-quality transit stop or station. BART stations qualify, Metrolinks, that sort of information. Of course, we prefer that you provide a scaled, clearly scaled map of all your amenities and locations. For recreational amenities, within a half mile of a park or recreational facility, I'd like to point out that school grounds, college campuses, and golf courses are not eligible. This is other facilities may qualify as long as there's no additional cost to the tenant. We just want to make sure that it's clear that these are to be free for the tenant when you sign up for anything of that nature. But the recreational amenities are normally within an urban area. They should be within a half mile. Moving on to site amenities part 2. Within a half mile of a full-scale grocery store, supermarket. There seems to be a little bit of confusion out there in our community as to what will garner the points for a project. A signed letter of evidence is needed for that grocery store, stating that it is at least 25,000 gross interior square feet, and it's also within a half mile of your project. That letter needs to come from the manager or the owner of the store. We also have been accepting property tax scrolls that identify the square footage of that particular site. As long as the addresses have matched for that site, we will consider the request. Also, within a quarter mile of a neighborhood market of at least 5,000 gross interior square feet, rural projects within a half mile. Once again, a signed letter of evidence is needed. You want to make sure that you identify that in fact it is indeed 5,000 gross interior square feet or more to qualify as a neighborhood market under those conditions within a quarter mile. Grocery means a full service store or supermarket that provides food staples, fresh meats, poultry, dairy products, and produce, as well as household products. Convenience stores and mini markets are not eligible, i.e. 7-Elevens, your Circle K's, those don't qualify. Again, we like to refer to the Cdlac regulations 5230JC, and of course we prefer that scaled, clearly scaled map and marking all your amenities for your particular project. Part 3, site amenities, the public school amenities. Within a quarter mile of a public elementary school, half mile of a middle school, mile of a public high school, for those children living in the development. Also for rural projects, an additional half mile for each public school type has been considered. There's a lot of times a project will mark that they have a school and they are eligible for the points, but there's no signed letter of evidence from the school district or a school finder printout that's identifying that that particular project is within that school district or school serving that particular school that they've marked off on their amenity scaled map. So please provide the evidence. Proposed projects that are restricted to residents 55 years or older are not eligible for those points. Again, Cdlac regulations 5230JD. And we move on. Site amenities part 4. Medical amenities within a half mile, a mile for rural projects for a medical clinic, You need to characterize that there is a physician's assistant or nurse practitioner at least on site for a minimum of 40 hours each week. Within a mile and a half of rural projects of a hospital, not a private doctor's office, and or within a half mile, 1 mile of for rural projects of a pharmacy. That seems to be one of the most popular items to provide evidence for. Again, the medical clinic with a physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner on site, those are like Med 7s or emergency, urgent care, those kind of places. Those have qualified in the past. That's again citing Cdlac regulations 5230JE. And we move on to site amenities part 5.
Before we move on, Richard, can you give some more examples of medical amenities? What's acceptable as evidence?
As evidence for instance, like a hospital, you mean the hospital, or?
Yeah, what we need as evidence.
Actually, you need as evidence, what we'd like to see is perhaps a pamphlet or a website identifying that particular medical clinic, a website or a pamphlet describing that hospital. The pharmacies, normally we've accepted the fact that it's a Walgreens or CVS, a photograph of that particular site that is within the half mile or a mile of your rural projects. Those are the items that we have accepted in the past. When you're identifying a website and you're printing out that evidence and sending it along as evidence for your amenities portion, it depends on the joint application. The amenities have sub numbers to them, so you want to make sure that you're copying off the website pages and they all are submitted. Sometimes just a picture of an address doesn't really cut it. We do need to know the vital information of what kind of services they are providing. Thank you. Now, site amenities part 5. The library amenities within a half mile of a public library. That's pretty self-explanatory. A lot of folks, I have had several folks ask me whether or not the hours matter. The fact that the library is there and it is open to the public and it is within a half mile, that's all we really need. And we need that marked off on your site amenity map. If you would like, you can provide a photograph of the site just to reinsure the fact that you're going to get the points. For the entire site amenities section, there's a 10 points total max that you can garner for your project. I'd like to point out that the internet amenities for those projects that are new construction and AC rehab, we highly recommend that you put those in. That's a very easy thing to do. It's not necessarily that expensive for the project, and it will garner those 2.5 points for your project, and especially if your project is struggling for points for one reason or another. This is a very easy thing for you guys to do out there. Again, that's Cdlac regulations 5230 J, F, Ed through G.
This next point category is the service amenities. I won't be going through all of the amenities, just the ones that commonly do not receive points because of the lack of evidence or insufficient evidence. One of the point categories that we usually see is the instructor-led classes. So projects with instructor-led education classes, health and wellness, or skill-building classes, including but not limited to like financial literacy, computer training, home buyer education, GED, English as a second language, nutrition, exercise, health. Um, some other of the classes can also include like art, parenting, on-site food cultivation and preparation, and smoking cessation. Instruction is to be provided for a minimum of 84 hours per year. So things that are not acceptable are drop-in computer labs, monitoring or technical assistance shall not qualify. So an agreement outlining the above is needed. So what we are looking for as evidence is an MOU or an agreement from the provider outlining what those services are going to be, and confirm that those services will be provided for a minimum of 84 hours per year, and that it is free to the tenants. Another category in service amenities that we commonly see where you guys are seeking the points, however, the evidence is not provided or it's lacking something that's needed. So the category is health and wellness classes. So health and wellness services and programs for individualized support for tenants, not group classes. So it has to be on an individual basis per tenant. Or organizations such as visiting nurses, intergenerational visiting, and senior companion programs for a minimum of 100 hours per year. Again, we need an agreement outlining the above as needed. So again, we will need an MOU on agreement from the provider, and it must confirm that those services will be provided for individualized support for tenants, and will be provided for a minimum of 100 hours per year. The next service amenity is service coordinator. A bona fide service coordinator or social worker available, experience and duties of the coordinator, and a budget to pay the coordinator must be included. Again, we need an agreement outlining what it is, and please list the hours and the full-time equivalent. So the evidence that we need like a duty statement, we need a budget to pay the coordinator, and an agreement outlining the services to be provided.
Moving on to new construction and substantial renovation projects, sustainable building methods, part 1. I'm not going to spend too much time on this particular page. It's some of these are pretty much the low-hanging fruit. If you have an irrigation system or are using reclaimed water, basically you're going to take advantage of that. At least one non-smoking building. That's pretty important that you have, if you're going to be doing something of that nature, to mark it off as to your advantage. And the parking ratio, a lot of communities have a requirement for your parking situation at your particular project. We're just helping in providing points for that commitment that you have had to make by code. So these are kind of, like I said, low-hanging fruit items on the sustainable building methods for your projects. Moving on to the next page, part 2, the new construction and adaptive reuse. If you're going to choose, for instance, LEED, Green Communities, Passive House Institute, U.S. Living Building Challenges, Green Point rated, please remember you do need the architect certification for that. And also you need to check off, especially for those rehab projects out there, you most often check off that you're doing perhaps a green point, but you don't say how much that you're doing improving the energy efficiency, either by 15 or 20%. So you may be expecting points, but you won't get it because you didn't check off either 15 or 20%. So that's pretty important. So please remember to, in order to garner those points, you need to choose one of those two. And that's referencing Cdlac Regulations 5230K 6 through 8.
Okay, I think that you guys are going to be very interested in this. Based that we are in a competitive process allocation program right now. So, well, coming up in 2020, I'm sorry. So, everybody knows about the Cdlac tiebreaker. I just want to point it out to you, section 5034, applications submitted under a competitive application process will be ranked according to the number of points awarded by the committee pursuant to the evaluation criteria specific to the state ceiling pool or program to which the application is addressed. If there is a court project, here's where it's interesting, guys. If there is a court project or projects that score the same number of points, Cdlac will determine the order in which this or these projects will be awarded allocation based on the Cdlac tiebreaker for corps. So the Cdlac tiebreaker for corps is based on the following calculation. So what we do is we take the allocation requested amount for the project and we divide it by the number of restricted units. That is going to give us the Cdlac tiebreaker. So whichever project has the lowest Cdlac tiebreaker will be recommended for a corp allocation first, and then the next, and then so on and so on. So we wanted to bring that to your attention based on the fact now, like I said, that we are in a competitive application process. So that's important for you guys to consider when you are garnering your points, because we want your projects to be successful, and so we're trying to give you as much information as possible to ensure that. We'd like to see some high scoring projects that provide public benefits to the tenants and the economic growth of the community.
So before I get to the fun topic of negative points, just as a reminder, in case you didn't get with this, we are going over the multifamily scorecard. We do have a scorecard for industrial development bonds, and we do have specific criteria for exempt facilities. So feel free to check with the regs or email us, and we can go over that with you as well. So moving on to negative points. One thing I wanted to stress is that negative points are associated with the project sponsor or a related party to the project sponsor. That's important. We do negative points when you fail to use the allocation that is submitted, or if your allocation or the issuance that you actually do for those bonds are less than 20%, or you're not using more than 80% of the allocation, we can assess negative points. Other thing to note is we are looking for, when you come for an appeal or if you have a concern, we do want to see that the circumstances are unforeseen and beyond the project sponsor's control. That's pretty major. That's one thing we look for when considering any appeal from negative points. The other thing to note for negative points, is we can also issue negative points for failing to comply with the resolution. that is set forth. We also work with TCAC, and we look at negative points that they assign, and we do have a shared list, so we both, TCAC and Cdlac, know who's on the negative points list. And we also can do that for multiple or repeated failures for issuance. So we do look at that. We have in the past waived negative points, but in a competitive environment, we will be paying attention to how the negative points are issued from both agencies. So with that, just a few closing remarks. The one thing to note is that the revised joint application has been tested and should be live on Tuesday. So look out for it. In the meantime, I assume you've been working really hard at preparing all your attachments, getting all the details, and as you've heard from Richard and Sarah, all the evidence that we need in those attachments to make sure that when you do fill out the new application that you'll get the points that you need. Also, as a reminder, projects for TCAC's January round not seeking state tax credits will also be scored and ranked, but will compete with applications received in January for the March Cdlac allocation round. So the March Cdlac allocation round will include applications received from November 15th not seeking state tax credits. And then a couple of other things. We hope you found this workshop informative. We really wanted to state that in the competitive world, the score really does matter, which is why the focus really was on the scorecard, as well as completeness of application. And I hope you guys have had a chance to attend our summer workshop. Our summer workshop focused more on the attachments. So knowing the completeness of your attachments, and together that will get you in good standings for one of our rounds. Before I end this, I just want to see if Sarah, Richard, you guys have anything to add?
Just make sure that also for your minimum application requirements, we will not be accepting placeholders. So if you submit a document and it is not the correct document, like just for instance for inducement resolution, and well, no, let me take that back. Just for title, let's do title. So if you submit an attachment in the section for a title report, and what you place in there is something else other than a title report, we will not be contacting anybody. Can I say that? Mm-hmm. We will not be contacting anybody for documents that are not there. If the application is incomplete, if there's information missing out of the application itself, because of the fact that we anticipate a large volume of applications, Cdlac staff will not have the time actually to go through like the regular review process that we go through, where we include contacting the applicant and the project sponsor to let them know what's missing. If there's something missing, especially a minimum application threshold item, we will be moving on to the next project. So that's important for you guys to understand. And also for the applicant, the Cdlac applicant, before you hit that submit button, we strongly suggest that you look through that whole application and make sure that everything is there, and before you hit submit, because once you hit submit, that's going to be it. And so hopefully, this will, the training that we're doing and the assistance that we're providing will make for a better product for you guys. And so I just wanted to bring that out as far as the minimum application requirements is very, very important. And like I said, no placeholders can be in there. And so please remember that. Very important.
And as the bond issuer, you are, and I'll repeat again, you are our applicant, so it's important that you review everything that's been submitted and uploaded before we release the application.
I'd just like to add that in order for us to be the best advocate for your projects, make sure you have all the information you can possibly gather in order to garner all the points that you can possibly earn for your project. We're not here to stop your project. We want the projects to be successful, as has been said before. But for us to be the best advocates, please provide as much information you possibly can about your project in your description, everything. It really is beneficial. We do read it, and if we can pull some information from one spot in order to answer a question that we may have had earlier or down the line, it's extremely helpful because you have it documented. So that's the key point. Any and all information is best for you. We want to be the best advocate for your project. So just remember, we're not here to stop you guys. We're here to help. Call before you submit that application if you really have a challenge. So we're here to help. That's it.
One more thing is, how can I say it? In order for us to recommend the project, it's all dependent, I'm going to stress this, on the product that we get from you guys. And so it's very important that a lot of you that are probably watching this, please take into consideration like all the emails that we've sent you guys and what it is that we have asked you for in the past. And so I just want to make sure that you are incorporating that into your submittal. For instance, like if the commitment letter isn't signed by the project sponsor, and we used to contact you guys about that. So just take those emails that we've sent you guys and those issues that we brought up for you guys in the past for those projects, and just make sure that you're incorporating those into your application submittal. It would help you guys as well as us.
Very well said. And again, we want to help you guys out. We want you guys to succeed, but we need the information we need to help you guys do that. So with that said, I just want to thank you for viewing our workshop, and also thank you to our veterans for the service to our country.
Yes, absolutely.